This is a video on how to complete the TP-CASTT poetry analysis. So we start with asking ourselves, okay, well, first off, what are we doing? Well, we are, as the skill says at the top, we're going to analyze figurative language to reveal a theme. Remember that analyze means to break apart a text and look at the pieces. Figurative language is language that is not literal. It is not actual. And figurative language is broken down into a couple of different categories in terms that we've learned earlier in the year, like simile, metaphor, personification, imagery, symbolism. So we're breaking apart the metaphors and personification and the imagery, and we're seeing how that figurative language reveals a theme. And the theme we know is the author's message about life. So we are breaking apart the personification, the imagery, so that we can come up with what the author's trying to tell us about life. So a way that we can break apart a poem is by doing the TP-CASTT. So as we start, we are going to read the poem. And of course, we've done this already, but I want you to really read the poem called Ode to Sadness multiple times. Try to figure out, okay, what is the poet trying to tell me? Okay, notice punctuation marks. I think that's going to be huge for this video, this poem. So the first T is all about trying to figure out, okay, what is the title at first trying to tell me? As you notice, that first T just says, what do you think about the title? What can you predict about the title before you even read? Okay, what is the poem going to be about? I think the poem will be about blank. Once you finish that, you read the poem again and then you paraphrase. The P stands for paraphrase. And because this poem, Ode to Sadness, is not broken up in stanzas, we have to break it up by lines. So paraphrase means to put a text in your own words. It's kind of like summarizing, but it's shorter. So lines 1 through 10, I'm going to say in my own words what I think lines 1 through 10 is. What's going on in lines 1 through 10. And then you do it for lines 11 through 20, and then lines 21 through 34. This is just so you can get a dealing and a handle on what's actually going on in the poem on the surface level. Once you get the surface level, you can then move on to actually analyzing deeper into the poem. Remember that poetry is a puzzle. It's supposed to be confusing. So if you feel confused, that's fine. Break it down, read it again, always go back to the text. After you paraphrase, you then go to the C, which is for connotation. Connotation, as we've learned before, is all about language, okay? That's really where we're getting into the skill on figurative language, okay? So the C, we're breaking apart the figurative language, okay? Look for personification, imagery, metaphor, symbolism, and usually we would look for simile, but you'll find that simile is not in this poem. Remember, personification is when unhuman things do human things. It doesn't actually have to be an object. It can be an idea as well. Imagery is language that you can definitely see in your head, or language that appeals to the senses. Think language and sentences or words that you can hear, feel, taste, touch, see. A metaphor is when the author or the poet compares two things and does not use like or as. And symbolism is an object or a thing or an animal or a being in the poem that can symbolize a deeper meaning. For example, the almanac last week in the poem Sestina symbolized grief or knowledge. Once we've broken up the connotation, the figurative language, now we're moving towards, okay, how can I look at figurative language more in the language of the poet to figure out what the theme is? The next letter is A, and the A stands for attitude. And we're looking at the speaker's attitude. I gave you a handout last week with different words on it for tone. I would take that sheet out and try to figure out, okay, based on the words, the diction in the poem, okay, the word choice, it's either going to be positive connotative diction or negative connotative diction. Think about the speaker who's telling this story in the poem. What is the tone? What is his attitude towards the subject? And if the subject is happiness, which in this poem it's not, but let's just say it is happiness. What is his attitude towards happiness? Is it positive or is it negative or is it just neutral? And then you pick some words, I would say about 3 or 4 from the list, and say the tone of the poem is blank, comma, and blank. Period. After you figured out the tone, we're now moving to shifts. Okay, a shift. That's just a little extra that we do in class. So shifts. What you're trying to find is, where is there a shift in imagery between negative and positive imagery? Where is there a shift in diction between positive diction and negative diction? Once you find a shift, a change, okay, you're going to mark that change by the line. And you'll say on your sheet, you'll write, there is a shift between lines blank and blank when blank, comma, then blank. For example, there is a shift between lines 15 and 16 when the imagery was positive when the poet stated sun shining on the bay, comma, then the diction was negative when the poet stated a darkness fell between the earth. So remember, with shifts, you're just trying to find where is there a change in imagery, in tone. You pick one of those, either imagery, tone, diction, any kind of shift that you see, any change. Now we're getting to the nitty-gritty. Now we're trying to figure out, okay, how does the figurative language reveal or show a theme? All right, so now we're on a T. This T, the one right here. This one right here. This T stands for title, and it's kind of like the first title, the first T that you did up here. But this T is more in line with, now that I've read the poem a couple times, what do I think the title means now? After analyzing, after breaking that text apart, what do I think the title means now? What do I think the poet was trying to tell me? So, what do you think the poet was trying to tell you after you've analyzed the poem, Ode to Sadness? And now we are at the nitty-gritty. We're at the last T, and the last T stands for theme, the author's message about life. This is the major skill that we're trying to work at. I gave you a handout that kind of looked like an equation, and you chose, and this is a handout that can really get you at what the theme of the text is. A couple of tips about theme: don't use the word you, and don't talk about characters in the poem. Make it universal. Make it to where it can apply to anybody in life. Okay? So on your equation, you're to first pick an abstract word that the poem, the subject of the poem. So let's say this is not about this poem, Ode to Sadness, but let's just say, for example, happiness. So happiness is my first word. Then I pick an adverb, okay? Occasionally. Happiness occasionally. Then I pick a transitive verb, oppresses. So happiness occasionally oppresses, and then you just finish out your thought on everyday life. What in this poem does happiness occasionally oppress? Well, let's just, for example, say happiness occasionally oppresses people, or when they look at the lives of other people before themselves. Happiness occasionally oppresses human beings when they look at the lives of other people. Okay, there's my theme. Notice how universal it is. Notice how I can apply it to any text. You're going to do this 2 times, okay? Pick an abstract word, an idea, a subject that you think this poem, Ode to Sadness, addresses, okay? What words do you think the poet is trying to reveal to us about life? Why did the poet write this poem? And then you're going to put it in that equation. Once you put all the words into the equation, you'll come up with your theme, okay? And I gave that handout out yesterday and today for 6th and 7th period. I gave it out today. I hope this helps. And now that we have finished the theme and we wrote 2 theme statements, the handout is called Basic Steps to Thematic Statements. We have actually figured out how figurative language reveals a theme. By completing the TP-CASTT, we have figured out how figurative language reveals a theme. I truly hope that this video has helped you. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm so happy that you have suffered through this. Poetry is an enigma. It is a puzzle. And once you get through it, you can really figure out the deeper meaning of a text. Thank you for your grit, your determination, and your self-control. Have a blessed evening. This is Mr. O.